Welcome to Independent Lifestyles, sponsored by Sheboygan County Aging and Disability Resource Center. We present programs that promote independent lifestyles and that direct you to resources that will help you maintain your health and independence in our community. I'm Christine Jeske, outreach worker at the ADRC, and I'll be your host today. Our topic today is human trafficking. I would like to let our viewers know that our intention is not to frighten anyone, however, to educate the community and provide awareness and tips to make our community safer. I would like to introduce to you Detective Ramington with the Sheboygan Police Department Criminal Investigation Division. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
It's nice that you came today.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am a detective with Sheboygan Police Department. I've been in law enforcement for over 22 years. Came from San Jose, California, where I was an officer out there, and have been in Sheboygan for over 11 years now.
And have you always been with the human trafficking? What did you do prior to that?
Prior to that, in California, I was a gang detective and a field training officer. I did work a couple human trafficking cases out in California, but it wasn't until I moved to Sheboygan that my eyes were opened that we had this issue going on right here. It's a domestic issue, not just an international issue.
Mm-hmm. And did you work at any high school or anything prior to this?
I did. Prior to becoming a detective with Sheboygan Police Department, I was a school resource officer at one of the high schools here in Sheboygan for a couple years.
Do you think having that insight in the high school helped you with what you're doing now?
Definitely. I would like to thank the kids that I worked with at the high school, because they were actually the ones that opened my eyes that sex trafficking, human trafficking is going on here in our town.
In our little Sheboygan?
Yes.
It's amazing.
And again, I don't want to I'm not here to scare people. I just, as you said before, I want to educate and provide awareness, and hopefully we can use that information for prevention purposes.
Perfect. So, Detective Ramington, I am going to ask you a two-question, so I need you to answer them both. What is human trafficking, and could you give me the definition of human trafficking?
Okay, so human trafficking is it's modern day slavery is what it is, and it can be the selling of a human for sex, commercial sex acts, or using a human for labor purposes. So we have two types of human trafficking: sex trafficking and labor trafficking. 80% of the trafficking that we have in Wisconsin is sex trafficking, and they say 20% is labor trafficking. And what it is the actual recruiting of a human being, or the transportation, or the harboring, or the selling of a human being for either sex acts or labor purposes.
And when you say labor purposes, could you explain that a little more to me about what that means?
Sure. So we have, I work sex trafficking cases, and there are no active investigations of labor trafficking in Sheboygan at this moment, but I can guarantee that it is happening here. Anywhere that you have a county fair, anywhere that you have fields, farm work, that kind of thing, and some restaurants, some businesses. And we had a case in Madison of a homeowner that brought a human and was using them for cleaning and running the household, not letting that human leave the household for years.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So are the victims taken?
That's a good question. I get that a lot. There are different ways that this can look. Sometimes, and in the rare occasions, we do have victims that are actually taken, kidnapped. But what we see more often is somebody who, a trafficker who grooms the victim and then lures them and gets them, brainwashes them, basically to get them to do this. So not necessarily, they might still live in their house. They might still go to school if they're children. And we do have victims from age 2 to elderly.
2 years old.
And everything in between. So again, I want to open people's eyes that the victims, we shouldn't just be so closed-minded and think, well, it's only a certain age that this happens to, or it's only girls. It can be any age.
Unbelievable. How do they become a victim?
Well,
And, excuse me, could you give me a little scenario about trafficking as well? You know, like
Sure.
a scenario.
Okay, so that's a good question. You asked, what does it look like? How does it happen? 76% of the meetings between trafficker and victim happen via social media, over the computer, over a phone. So it's something that can happen over Facebook or Instagram, any of these different apps that we see nowadays. So the majority of cases, the trafficker is being introduced in that manner, not face-to-face. And it could be days or weeks, months, or even up to a year or more of grooming. And again, that's a person showering somebody with whatever it is that they're lacking or they feel that they're lacking in their lives, whether that's attention or material possessions, you name it. I mean, that trafficker and their master manipulators, that's something I also want people to know is they're not, the victims are not unintelligent and the traffickers are not unintelligent. They're very, very smart and devious. And so they become whatever it is that you are looking for. And so a scenario we have where somebody you might meet and they might, first it might happen on social media, or it could be in a restaurant. And it could be days or weeks or even, like I said, up to a year of getting to know you and becoming a so-called friend that you trust, and they groom you and get you to do things that you never would have done of your own accord.
So would you say that human trafficking has a dollar sign, or is it just anybody? It doesn't have to be poverty, middle class, rich, it's anybody.
Absolutely can be anybody, anybody who's vulnerable. And as human beings, I mean, all humans are vulnerable at some point in their life. But I have had survivors of human trafficking who have come from wealthy backgrounds. In the wealthy suburbs, I've had survivors of trafficking from the poor, from the ghettos. I've had everything in between. So again, I've had victims who have come from with a loving, hardworking family, but their parents are absent a lot, working, and so that's what's missing. It's somebody who's vulnerable that tends to get involved in this.
So they make a relationship with them.
They become what it is that you feel you're lacking.
Yeah, and then they flourish them with what's missing in their lives.
Yes.
To kind of lure them into the situation. And then once they lure them, excuse me, then what happens?
Then they can start to, I mean, we had a situation where grown women were, 6 of them were taken from Sheboygan by a very handsome man who knew that they were vulnerable. They were going through sometimes losing their residence or losing their apartment, losing a job, going through a custody battle, going through a difficult time in their lives. And this man appeared and became their knight in shining armor for each of the 6 women. He promised, they all wanted to have a relationship and be married, so he promised that to each of the 6. And one wanted to build a house, so he said, hey, we'll build a house. One wanted to go to Florida, hey, we'll go to Florida. He was making these false promises, and that's what human trafficking is also, is using force or fraud or coercion. So trickery comes in a lot. Scams, these false promises. And then after that, they might introduce drugs as a way of control. I hear people say, well, we don't have human trafficking in Sheboygan because I don't see people shackled or in chains. But the way that the trafficker shackles or chains a victim is via either threats, I'm not going to love you anymore, or I will hurt your family if you don't do this, or through false promises, or through drugging them. So there are different ways that these chains look.
Interesting. And where is this all happening?
Anywhere. It's actually officially documented in all 72 counties of Wisconsin. I'm also part of the federal task force for southeastern Wisconsin. So we meet regularly and discuss cases, but it is officially documented in all 72 counties. It's in every state of America, and it's worldwide. So it's absolutely, again, not to scare, but it is a big issue. It's very lucrative because the trafficker can make money over and over by selling a human over and over, but a trafficker, somebody can only make money once by selling a drug or once by selling a gun. So it is quickly passing up drug sales and gun sales.
Why the Midwest as one of the top places for human trafficking?
Yes, coming from California, I was shocked. My eyes were opened when I heard that the Midwest is a hub. Every year we have the federal task force has a sweep we do, and we have Operation Clean Sweep, in which we recover missing people, victims of trafficking, and we arrest pimps, traffickers. And every year the Midwest is always in the top 2 for the numbers that we arrest and rescue. And so they say that the Midwest is full of very trusting people. So the things that make us love the Midwest, like the trusting, nice personalities, people pleasing, the work ethic, also is what can make us vulnerable if we take it to an extreme. So I'm not saying that we need to be jerks. I don't want to see that change, but I think that we could be a little less trusting or a little more cautious to keep us safe.
So, excuse me again, what are some of the ways our viewers could be safer, less likely to be targeted or reached by a trafficker?
I'd say number one, if the viewer is involved in any sort of social media, please limit your information sharing. We've had so many situations where, again, we go and speak to schools about this topic, and I have students say, there's no way that somebody would research me for up to a year. Yes, absolutely, they would. So please limit your information sharing, what we're putting out there, because it can be used against you. Mm-hmm. We don't need to be telling people where we live and who our families are and where they go to school, that type of thing, and our patterns of behavior, because that makes us a target. Another thing is limit your friends on there. Don't just accept on Facebook. Really make sure you know who you're dealing with. Another thing, for the face-to-face contacts, make sure you really know where you're going and who you're dealing with, because we're seeing oftentimes, and females can be traffickers too. That's another thing I want to let people know. Yes, some of the most violent traffickers are women, but what we see, I've seen a trend in Sheboygan and elsewhere where a male pimp, a male trafficker, will have a female with him, because I know as a female myself growing up, I would have trusted a female. If the car would have pulled up and spoken with me. Do not get into a vehicle with strangers, even if they seem harmless. That's something that we have had happen in Sheboygan. If they offer to take you to go eat and bring you back. That's just a simple safety tip. Also, another safety tip, pay attention to your surroundings. Look around. We've actually had traffickers, when we arrest them, they say they're really happy that our community and the victims are so buried in our devices, whether that's a phone or an iPad. Make sure you keep your earbuds out. Pay attention to your surroundings, because the traffickers are paying attention. We need to make sure that we are paying attention so that we're not targeted.
Interesting. So when you arrest them and their trafficker person admits to all this, how do you protect that one person that was involved with the pimp?
And usually we have multiple victims. I mean, usually a trafficker will have up to 6 people in there. They call it's a stable of victims that they are selling. So we work very hard, whether the case is taken federally or stateside, to keep all of the victims safe. And now there are more resources for our victims, but we definitely try to stay in touch with them because the trafficker often isn't working alone. They often have family members. A trafficker could be a victim's family member. So in that case, it's a little more difficult. But we definitely have to partner and work with the victim to make sure they have resources to keep them safe.
Okay. And a lot of this you attribute to the media, correct? With Facebook and tweets?
Social media, yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm. What are some of the signs that a person may be trafficking victim? Yeah.
Something that we are telling people to look for is an unexpected, or no explanation for new clothing, hair, nails, gifts, multiple cell phones, or if they have an older boyfriend that they are secretive about, or if they have multiple motel keys, no explanation of where they're going. They might be at school or at work all week, but then they take off all weekend and no explanation. That's a red flag. Another thing, or if they appear frightened when you mention law enforcement, or appear malnourished or disoriented or perhaps drugged. If they have somebody always around them, we had a case where a victim did try to get away, did try to tell a store clerk that she was being trafficked, but the trafficker kept her so drugged, and that was the way he kept her in chains and controlled. She wasn't able to escape, and he was always nearby. Is somebody not in control of their documents or their identification, that kind of thing? Mm-hmm. Unexplained injuries, also branding. That's something that the trafficker will do to say that the victims are his property or her property.
So how do they brand them?
With scars, with burns, with tattoos. A common tattoo, I had a case where the trafficker's nickname was Mafia. This case I can discuss because he's now in prison, but he had numerous little girls that he had tattooed with his name, Mafia, in various places on their body. So if you see a common, for different community members, if you start seeing a pattern of people with these same scars or burns or tattoos, it might be a sign of someone.
So in our community, now I'm talking about Sheboygan County, not just Sheboygan, this is happening all the time, correct? And they actually brand these girls. They can.
They can.
And then everybody knows that this is Mafia or whatever's gal or whatever?
Yes.
Okay. Sometimes when you watch television and you're watching detective shows or investigations, they show these pimps to be real violent. Is that always the case, or do they become more violent when the person that's being controlled not following?
You have some good questions. So we actually have two types of pimp that are common. One is called a guerrilla pimp, and that is a violent, just right off the bat. I mean, that's the type that will get you and just grab you and hurt you, break your bones, and make you do what he or she wants you to do. That is very rare. I've only seen a couple of guerrilla pimps in my cases. The majority of the pimps or traffickers are Romeo pimps, meaning they shower you with love. And that's why, I mean, a lot of times, even right through, I mean, even after the case is done, the victims still say, I feel that I love this person. I mean, I feel like that I'm in love. So it's definitely being showered with love. Now, I have seen Romeo pimps become violent if somebody gets, if a victim gets strong and tries to escape or leave the business. So there is quite a bit of violence in these cases. But the majority is actually mental trauma. We see a lot of that kind of trauma.
So they break them down.
Break them down.
Tell them lies about their family. They don't love you as much. Look what I did for you. blah, blah, blah. And do these girls get a cut from their pimp, a pay?
Very rarely. I mean, if they even get anything, and that's exactly what it is. It's kind of like, hey, look what I've done for you. You owe me, and we call it debt bondage. You can never get out from under that debt, and that's another way they control you. I gave you a roof over your head. I bought you that nice outfit. Your mother doesn't love you. Your father doesn't love you. And we keep saying girls, boys can be victims too. The average age for boys getting involved in this is 12, and the average age for girls is 13. And the ages are now getting younger and younger.
Unbelievable.
But again, I want to let people know that we've had elderly victims. So everything in between, grown women, grown men being sold, that's more often labor trafficking.
So this might sound like a really wasteful question, but if a boy is being a trafficker, is the pimp a male? I mean, can a pimp be a male to a male? Am I using the right language?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, a pimp.
Okay, so the pimp has a man. Now he can have men too service other women.
You could. I haven't seen that so much. I've seen men or boys service other men.
Okay.
And the other thing is, in many of my cases, the customers, people ask, well, who are these customers? Because if we, buying this commercial sex act, customers can be anybody. They can be women and men. Again, all ages, all backgrounds.
It doesn't have a label on it. Rich, poor, poverty, middle class, high class.
Right.
It's scary. It is. It's really scary. And how do you detach yourself from this when your day is over?
That's a good question. I have a family too, so I mean, it's very important. And again, that's why it's important not to live being scared. I have people say, well, I shouldn't go to this place because this is where a trafficking incident happened. No, we can't stop going to places where this has happened. We can change how we are to be safer. So absolutely, I try to continue my life as I always have, and live with my children, but just have us aware and pay attention to our surroundings. I've had cases where a woman actually, when I was doing a presentation about sex trafficking, she raised her hand and said she witnessed somebody get taken from the center of Sheboygan. And she didn't call police because she didn't believe that things like that happened in Sheboygan. So that's why we have to get out the message that these things really do happen so that we can be a safer community. I don't see it as something to be scared of everywhere and everyone. We need to just continue living, but just pay attention and look out for each other.
You know, I've always taught my daughter, if it doesn't feel right, it's usually not right.
Right. And you're right there. I mean, the gut feeling is absolutely right. A lot of our victims don't have somebody telling them that. Some of our younger kids might not have anybody telling them that. So that's why it's important for us as community members who do have contacts with other people to share this information. Again, not to scare, but to just educate. This is how you can be safer so that these things don't happen, because they really can happen.
And having a good conversation with your kids.
Yes.
And always knowing where they're at.
Right.
And let them know that, no, there's nobody that was going to kill us if you do this. Or,
right.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Having that conversation is important. I had one case where the victim actually got away because we had the conversation about this 2 years prior.
Okay.
To her being actually approached by a pimp. And so she remembered our conversation and said, this is it. I remember this. And she was able to get away. And so if we can do that, I think prevention is key, because I've had so many people go through this, so many victims, and the trauma is so immense that we'd rather do the prevention piece, because once somebody goes through it, it's so hard to provide what they need to heal.
So what I learned today talking with you, when you watch this pimp stuff on TV, it's not like they grab you and they throw you in the car and then they beat you. And so it's not like that. It's building trust, giving them things that they want, and threatening them and their family.
Can be. It can be just, or basically, look how much I have done for you, now you owe me.
Yes.
So it's this, I've even had a case where 3 girls were lured into a car because the guy bought them hamburgers. Just gave them money and then caught up to them an hour later and said, hey, get in the car. Remember me? I'm the nice guy that just gave you money for hamburgers. And they knew, they had that gut feeling they shouldn't get in the car, but they felt like they owed him something. So again, that
Can't say it enough.
right.
So, as citizens, how can we become more involved in prevention and awareness as a community?
I think by having this conversation, I'm so proud of Sheboygan. I'm also involved in Madison, coming up with a screening tool for all of Wisconsin that will be released later in the year or in 2018. So that's great news. But they said that Sheboygan is really ahead as far as the awareness piece. And I commend the citizens of Sheboygan for, it's not a pretty topic. It can be a scary sounding topic, but the people of Sheboygan have just taken it and said, hey, I want to be educated about this so that it won't happen to us. So I really think more of that, the discussion, keep that discussion open, continue talking with our youngsters, with all of our community. We can all be a part of the solution. And just keep paying attention to your surroundings. If you see something, feel free to call us. It could be the piece of the puzzle that we're missing.
So you're not going to get yelled at if it's
No.
really not that.
No,
Yeah.
we would rather check into it. And, but it's amazing how many times those little pieces have ended up. And look at the case where the lady didn't call. And we could have recovered somebody or prevented them from being taken for 2 months and trafficked in Milwaukee.
Unbelievable. So it is a problem in our community and our county. Would you say one county is higher risk than the other? They're all the same?
People say, oh, Sheboygan, well, we do have a lot of cases, but I think it's because of our awareness. Again, I commend our police department, our sheriff's department, our community for really being on top of the awareness piece. So you're going to have more cases. We also have a wonderful district attorney's office that is really prosecuting these cases. Some counties aren't so lucky. So while people look at it, our numbers are higher, I see it as a positive that we're really handling it.
Good, good. So I bet you that your family, you're on your kids, I bet, like with the Facebook and the tweets and...
They actually don't want Facebook. That's their own choice, and I thought that was interesting.
That's good.
They don't want it because I think
That's
they
good.
hear of some of the problems. But it's an individual's choice.
Right.
We just
right.
need to be smart about it.
Yeah, more for entertainment, not for showing off.
Right.
Like, look at me, I'm water skiing today, or, yeah. Do you have anything else that would be very important for the people that are watching this show? What would be your last words that you would tell them?
The top 2 ways that people our traffickers are reaching our young people is by saying that they are a rap producer or a music producer or a photographer for modeling. So those are the top ways that we're really seeing them, because once you fill out the application to be a model, then they know where you live, where your parents live, and then they can get you. So just be careful with those. And another thing, the last tip would be to make eye contact. It doesn't work for social media kind of events, but in face-to-face contacts, we've heard that traffickers shy away from people who will make direct eye contact with them.
Well, Detective Remington, I would like to thank you for joining us and informing us on the human trafficking epidemic in our community. To our audience, thank you for tuning into Independent Lifestyles. Please join us next month for another interesting topic on maintaining your health and independence. Independent Lifestyle is sponsored by the Sheboygan County Aging and Disability Resource Center and is shown on Charter Channel 990, UVerse Channel 99, and WSCS Sheboygan.com. Mondays at 2:30 p.m., Wednesday at 7 p.m., and Thursday at 9:30 a.m. See you next month.